was just released that Mark Cuban, he investigated refs back in 2006 as well because he was questioning the entire referees from that playoff series. With all this going underneath Stern's watch, how is the general public still praising him and not realizing some of these stuff that are going on?
It's perceived perception. I used to work for Mel Karmazin, who is a giant in the industry. And Mel and I knew each other for a long time. Back in 1979, his nephew Steve Karmazin, who did the right thing and ended up not staying in the business and becoming an attorney. When I was 23 years old back in 1979 at a 500-watt radio station, WGRC. I guess it was in 1980, so I was 24 at the time. And Steve was my intern. And so, Mel took an interest in me because I was helping out his nephew. And Mel and I have had an interesting relationship over the years, pretty good relationship over the years. But anyway, Mel's whole thing is perceived perception. And perceived perception is pretty easy. It's how the public perceives a figure that they don't know, but know of, because in his case it was Don Imus and Howard Stern, who were his employees, and they have a perception. But you don't know those guys, I don't know those guys, but they're in your home every day, if you so choose. So if you so choose, you have in your mind's eye, this is what this guy is all about, or this woman is all about. In your mind's eye, David Stern, you've heard how wonderful he's been over the years, how great he's been over the years. He wanted to impose a dress code on the players to make them look more presentable. He wanted to improve the game and get 18-year-olds out of the game because they were bringing down the game. People bought that. The reason why the NBA doesn't want high school graduates / 18-year-olds in the league is more of an economic issue than it is, they can't play good basketball. Under the old set of rules, you could draft an 18-year-old. He could come into the league. You had to pay him an entry-level contract, and you had 3 or 4 years to decide what to do with him. What happened there was, I'll take the perfect example. Jermaine O'Neal, who ended up having a really good NBA career. But he was drafted by Portland as a kid. He sat on the bench, didn't play. And his second contract at the age of 21 came up, and Portland had to figure out what to do with him. Do we invest, and could he be a bust in the second contract and cost us millions of dollars? Or we just let him go, and what happens if he develops? Well, if you get the 18-year-olds out and you draft players at 19 and you have your standard contract, the contract's done at 22. By 22, you know what kind of basketball player you're going to get. You're either going to get a pretty good player or you're going to get a journeyman player, and you don't have to roll the dice on what this guy is going to do in terms of future production. You know pretty much what kind of player he is, and you can pay him accordingly. So all the stuff that the sports writers feed into, and the sports writers feed into a lot of the stuff in sports because they're umbilically tied to either the public relations department of a team or to get credibility with the players. Stephen A. Smith. If Stephen A. Smith loses the players in the NBA, he's just another guy who's shouting, but he has some credibility because he's got players that he's buddies with. So, in a sense, Stern convinced everybody that it was, well, we don't want 18-year-olds on the court because they're not mature enough, they're not this, they're not that. That's what he sold the public. The public and the sports media bought it. The truth of the matter is they were worried about the second contract in overpaying somebody and losing millions of dollars on a bad investment on the second contract. And if you look at it logically, look at it very, very logically, because this was told to me by an owner. Stern's argument to the public is perfect. Stern's and the public perception of it, the players are immature and they're not ready to play. What I never understood, an 18-year-old can go to Iraq go to Afghanistan, be put in harm's way. What kind of harm's way is it if he's sitting on the bench watching the New York Knicks City Dancers?
Kevin Love, he announced, him and his agent, that he does not want to stay in Minnesota after his contract is up after the 2014 season, and he's saying he's going to opt out, and now the Minnesota Timberwolves are perhaps looking to trade him. With this news of Kevin Love not wanting to re-sign with them after the season, should the Timberwolves trade him immediately?
Oh, absolutely. But first, before we get into that, you gotta give a lot of respect to Kevin Love. I mean, as much as he's disgruntled, it takes a big man to step out there and say, hey, listen, you know I can opt out, you know that you can get nothing for me, but I'm telling you right now that I want to be traded. So I just want to give a lot of respect to Kevin Love as a player, not only on the court for his athletic skills and what he brings to the team, but as a man and a player, because we've seen plenty of other players not say anything, just be disgruntled and kind of leave. So kudos to Kevin Love for doing that. Now for the trade, he's definitely going to be traded. I think nothing's going to happen until, after the draft. You're going to see what kind of positions people have. There were a lot of teams vying for him, and as well as there should be. You've got a guy who can average a double-double a season, who can bring another big man presence. He can play the 4, he can play the 5. He's kind of versatile in that role, and even as disgruntled as he has been, he's been a very good key component for a poor Timberwolves team.
Yeah, they have a high draft pick, likely a high draft pick in this year's NBA draft. He does have players like Ricky Rubio, Kevin Martin surrounding him. So do you think he doesn't think that's enough to really go to the playoffs as an A seed for the Timberwolves?
No, I don't think that's enough. I mean, when you look around the talent that the West has, a Ricky Rubio and a Kevin Love and some of these other guys, it's not enough to match with the Thunder, with the Spurs, with some of these other teams, the Clippers. Hell, even the Memphis Grizzlies have more talent, it seems to me. I think Ricky Rubio is overrated. And I think, with that being said, that's why he's maybe looking at an Eastern Conference team. And, I know you had mentioned the Celtics to me personally, and I think the Celtics with a high draft pick this year in the lottery, plus a couple other guys that they can move, I think the Celtics could land Kevin Love, and it might change some things that are happening in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, he said he was intrigued for playing for Boston. I'm not sure why he would. Is that a good fit for him?
I think, if you look at the Celtics, they're a team in rebuilding. This was kind of the plan, not to tank the season, but to kind of see what you got. They got the 25 wins. You got the Butler head coach in his first year. They're kind of moving in the right direction. And I think putting a marquee piece in Kevin Love in Boston and building around that. You got to get rid of Rondo. You got to put some other things around there. And plus, he's intrigued because he could be the centerpiece to build around. I think in Minnesota, he doesn't see them being able to do enough to make him the centerpiece, and that's why he's intrigued to be the centerpiece of that team.
Yeah, they say that Kevin Love and Brad Stevens go back to his college years, and do you think this is a way to perhaps persuade him to go to Boston?
Oh, absolutely. I think when you look at the NBA and you look at some of the guys who play with coaches, they have a comfort level with coaches. They have a good rapport with coaches. And when you have a star player and a coach that get along well together, that star player is willing to do anything. And I think that's definitely something that could help push the Kevin Love to the Boston Celtics deal.
And to land a player like Kevin Love, how much do you think a team would have to give up?
I'm thinking you're going to have to dump some salary, because Minnesota wants to dump some salary. So you're going to have to take on Kevin Love. You might have to take on one or two other guys. And I would definitely offer 2 first-round picks and another player. Like, let's just throw out there, you throw Rondo, this year's first-round pick, and maybe a future first-round pick. Kevin Love is definitely worth something to sacrifice the franchise over.
And if you had to predict, where do you think perhaps this Love story will end up in?
I'm thinking he's going to Boston, but I wouldn't hold out hope. Like, I'm thinking of the dark horse in this. I know you're hearing the Lakers. I know you're hearing a lot of teams that are involved. But my top 2 for Kevin Love is either the Boston Celtics or the Houston Rockets. And imagine a combination of Dwight Howard and Kevin Love.
That'd be simply amazing.
That would be something in the West that could be unstoppable, because you look at what the Rockets did this year, making a push, doing what they did. Imagine you had someone, and Dwight Howard looked like the Dwight Howard from back in his first couple of years in Orlando, and imagine putting someone else around him like that. But then the question remained with Dwight Howard, and you heard the talk with him, how he doesn't get along well with others, he doesn't play nice. That's why I'm not too certain on the Rockets, but I just think for some reason with the Celtics, like you said, the coach, the front office, what they're trying to do, I think that's something Kevin Love would buy into.
Colts owner Jim Irsay made his first public appearance since his arrest. He was caught with a DWI, that funny mugshot that he had, and Roger Goodell still has yet to really punish Irsay for his brush with the law. Irsay did go to rehab, which is kind of bullcrap, doesn't really do anything for him. But in your opinion, why has Roger Goodell really not punished Jim Irsay for his public actions?
Like I said, I feel like the NFL definitely maybe more lenient on the owner's side. They do discipline their players. Ben Roethlisberger, I cannot talk today, and Michael Vick, and they've all been punished, for the crimes that they've committed. But, we don't see it as much on the owner's side like we would, say in the NBA. And but I think it looks bad. I think it looks bad on the organization as a whole, and it looks bad on the players and who's actually representing them.
Yeah, we saw in the NBA with the whole Donald Sterling fiasco that just won't go away. How quick and swift they've been about banning him. They're still going through the process of really terminating his ownership with the Clippers. But why is the NFL just so slow with this?
I wish I could say why. I really don't understand. I think that they definitely are more lenient in not knowing, I guess, all of the details. Like Sterling, if you kind of had that hard evidence of that recording. And I think, with Irsay's stuff that he's going through, it's almost nobody really kind of knows exactly what's going on, so they can't make any hard accusations just yet.
Do you think it's because you just mentioned that Irsay's actions were out in the open, but Sterling's were right in front of everybody's face? Do you think that has the bigger reason why Sterling came down harder?
Oh, no doubt. And especially the situation he was put in. I mean, come on now. Making racist comments about the NBA, that's just asking for trouble.
I think he was talking to Paula Deen when he made those tapes.
I think he did. I think that they were probably making some stuff with butter and all, like she likes. And they were making racist comments.
And Richard Sherman, after this whole Down Sterling thing came out, he said the NFL would have handled the Sterling situation differently than the NBA did, perhaps not even banning him. Do you agree with his assessment that the NFL would have been more lenient towards Sterling?
That's kind of hard to say, but honestly, I really don't think they would have been as lenient either. I think it's because of the situation that Sterling was in, with the recordings and exactly like what he said, because NBA is predominantly African-American, and there is a lot of African-American players in the NFL as well, and I feel like if, Irsay were to do something like that, he would be definitely disciplined.
I'm not a big fan of conspiracy theories, but everybody, especially in the NBA draft, call for conspiracy theories when it comes to the NBA draft lottery, especially when the Cavs only had a 1.7 chance of this happening. Everybody's calling for a fix yet again. What's your opinion on this?
I mean, the reason that there is such a conspiracy theory is because the tone that was set with the 85 draft lottery was the most probably notorious, quote-unquote, fixed the draft lottery, to where people accuse the NBA of rigging that thing. So that kind of set the tone for the rest of the draft. And now we're in this era where the internet is king, and that's all you see on the internet is all these conspiracy theorists. I'm not one of these conspiracy theorists. I think if there was a draft lottery conspiracy, the Cavaliers would be the last team, I would think, to get 3 out of 4 number 1 picks. They're snake-bitten as ever. And the fact that they haven't done very much with the number 1 picks they've gotten, you'd think that the NBA would say, you know what, you guys take a step back, we're going to give this to somebody else. And the Lakers wouldn't be down to number 7 if this was rigged. And the Spurs one year got Tim Duncan and David Robinson. So just, it's too random, and I just don't think that there's a conspiracy going on.
Even with their botched pick from last year with Anthony Bennett, you think they're giving Cleveland a second chance?
I mean, I wouldn't consider that a botched pick as much as a botched draft class. I mean, that draft class will go down as one of the worst in NBA history. I would be willing to guess that Michael Carter-Williams of the Philadelphia 76ers may be the only guy to ever make an All-Star game out of that class. So there really was very little you could work with in that class. I don't see that.
For the Cavaliers, the likely departure of free agent Luol Deng, and the Cavs' most pressing need is for a skilled small forward who can shoot. Yet Cleveland does have Tristan Thompson and Anderson Varejao up front. Who do you think the Cavs take with that number 1 pick?
Well, I mean, Joel Embiid is out there, and they have expressed interest in him. He is a 7-footer, which scares me. And he has had some whispers of injury concerns. Jabari Parker does fit that, and I think he can fit that small forward mode, as well as Andrew Wiggins, who would be a little more of a project in that role. But I really do see the Cleveland Cavaliers, if they're serious about getting good, immediately trading away that pick. I know that there are, like I said, whispers about Joel Embiid having back problems, but if the Cavs take him, he's going to have back problems. It's just how Cleveland is wired, to just be snake-bitten and to be cursed. So I think it might behoove them to trade that away and try to go after Kevin Love.
So this is the second.
It's really worked out for them lately.
This is the second year in a row where the Cavs have the number 1 draft pick. How does this help the chance of perhaps LeBron returning to Cleveland, or you think those rumors are really hogwash?
I wouldn't say they're necessarily hogwash. It's all going to depend on Cleveland putting its best foot forward, not only with the head coach, but let's say Andrew Wiggins stands out. And right now he is being promoted as this future superstar. So if they take an Andrew Wiggins and he ends up just being a very, very good player and the potential is there, and right now you could consider him somewhat of a superstar, especially with those pictures coming out of him and his vertical and just all this excitement about him. LeBron might look at that situation and say, I've got 2 of the best young players in the NBA to play with. I'm 29 years old. If I ever want to even come close to catching Jordan, I'm not going to do it on this old Miami Heat team. So if you do that and you get a head coach who's capable, then that's a team that could have another dynasty. I just think it's all going to depend on how well Cleveland presents itself through free agency and possibly the draft.
June 7th is the race for the Belmont Stakes. What are some challenges you foresee already that California Chrome is facing in this race?
Well, I think the main thing is going to be the distance, and it's going to be up to Victor Espinosa to sort of decide when he lets California Chrome loose, and Belmont is a hugely different racetrack. It's a mile and a half around, and it's very easy to get. You have to time your moves a little bit differently than you do at other tracks. And Victor has been he actually rode War Emblem. He was going for the Triple Crown back in 2002, and War Emblem got off to a bad start and never really had a chance in that race. So hopefully that experience will, I think Victor's ridden enough at Belmont to sort of know that track well enough. But that's really going to be sort of the key for a horse like this, that he reserves his speed and make sure, because I think there's horses that have more stamina in this race, so it's going to be up to Victor to sort of ration out California Chrome's stamina so he has enough there at the end.
So the whole storyline will be about the Triple Crown, and California Chrome will now be facing horses that have more rest than him. California Chrome will only be about on a week and a half, almost 2 weeks of a rest. Does this somewhat hurt his chances of winning the Triple Crown?
Yeah, that's been sort of the pattern the last couple of years. We have a horse that skips the Derby, skips the Preakness, excuse me, and then it's with the idea that he's fresh for the Belmont. And that happened to Smarty Jones. There's a horse that didn't run in any of the Triple Crown races that was fresh and beat him. Funny Side lost to a horse that skipped the Preakness. So that's definitely a concern. You have horses like Wicked Strong and Danza, who are Grade 1 winners and ran well enough in the Derby, but decided to skip the Preakness in order to be at their absolute best for the Belmont. So that's definitely a challenge as well to face these horses when you've gone through every battle and you're facing horses that have skipped one, and they can be a little pressure.
And the field is much larger compared to the Preakness. Does this somewhat hamper his chances as well and makes it harder to complete that Triple Crown?
Yeah, I think there'll be maybe 10. Yeah, I think the maximum is 14 horses for the Belmont. And Belmont, like I said, is a huge racetrack with big sweeping turns. So it's actually pretty difficult. It's a little bit more difficult to get in trouble as far as being blocked at Belmont than it is at Churchill and even Pimlico. So I think as long as he breaks well and Victor does what he did in the Preakness and demands that good early position, then he should have every chance. It's just a matter if he's good enough and if he's still sharp enough after all these grueling races in 5 weeks.
Right On Curling was the runner-up in the Preakness, expected to be a heavy favorite in the Belmont as well. Is this one of California Chrome's biggest threats to win the Triple Crown?
Yeah, I think he has a chance. I think probably right now I'd say his biggest threats would be some of those horses that were not in the Preakness. Horses like Wicked Strong and Danza. Commanding Curve was making a nice run at him in the Derby. He'll be back for the Belmont. And there's a horse named Tonalist who skipped both the Derby and the Preakness, but won the Peter Pan race in New York, basically the local preparation for the Belmont. He won that race in pretty impressive fashion. That was on a wet track, so if it does happen to be sloppy on Belmont Day, that horse can be extra dangerous.
Well, 2 weeks from now, Belmont Stakes, June 7th. In your opinion, do you think 77-year-old Art Sherman and California Chrome will be now the first Triple Crown winner since 1978?
I have to say personally that I'm cautiously pessimistic. I would love to see it, but I've been teased a lot over the last few decades. So I'm going to kind of watch and read and let my opinion kind of formulate over the next couple weeks. But right now, like I said, cautiously pessimistic is the best I can be right now.
Thanks again for joining today. I am Ryan Neiman. This has been Sports District Radio, SDR. Don't get confused with FDR. But follow us on Twitter at Sports District Radio. We are on the web at fsportsu.com. Like us on Facebook at Sports District Radio. I am Ryan Neiman. This has been Sports Talk with an AH.
Trails across the blue sky, your ponytail showing off the sunshine like a postcard out of